guys, and welcome back to another video on my channel. Just quickly before we get into today's video, I do just want to ask you guys how you are finding the new background music. I think that would be the music in the last two videos that I uploaded and now today's video. I can't really decide if I love it or hate it, so please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But with that all being said, let's get right into today's video. Today I'm back with another cryptid video, and the cryptid that we are going to be talking about today is one that I got suggested to look into on my last cryptid video by one of you guys. And the cryptid that we are diving into today is called the Tatzelwurm. Now, I also saw a breakdown of the word on the internet and it was Tatzelwurm, but it's a W, so I'm thinking either I'm saying it completely wrong or the breakdown was wrong. But Tatzelwurm is what I'm going to be calling it today, so if I am saying that wrong, I do profusely apologize. But anyways, this is a European cryptid, which I think is pretty cool because I have never covered a cryptid outside of Canada and the United States before, and this cryptid is often seen in the Alps. And it is also known as the Alps dragon, the stolen worm, and the spring worm, and several other names. This cryptid is most often seen in Germany, Italy, Austria, and Switzerland. And this cryptid, or this creature, has dated back hundreds of years, with the first sighting of this cryptid ever being seen in 1779. So a very, very long time ago. So I'm going to start off by giving you guys a description of what exactly this creature looks like, and then we're going to dive into kind of sightings and encounters with the Tatzelwurm, starting with the first ever sighting that was reported in the 17th century. Over the years, the description of what exactly the Tatzelwurm looks like has varied from person to person, although the kind of like main things about the creature's appearance do remain the same. So this cryptid is often described as having the body of a snake and the head that looks like it is a mixture between a cat and a lizard. Now, although this creature is described as having a body like a snake, it is often described as having 4 legs, and you can see all 4 of them. It has also often been described as having 2 legs just on the front of its body, but none on the back. And some people have even said that they have seen the Tatzelwurm walking on 2 legs, bipedal, like a human. So obviously that kind of varies from story to story, from encounter and to encounter over the years. And again, this cryptid has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, which gives a lot of time to kind of, I guess, like grow and change if this cryptid is in fact real. Many people also describe this cryptid as looking like a dragon, but again, dragons and lizards and snakes, all a combination of those reptiles, all do kind of carry the same kind of appearance. Like, they do have a lot of similarities, so I can definitely see somebody describing it as looking like a lizard, whereas somebody else may describe it as looking like a dragon. Another thing about this cryptid to note and to keep in your mind is many people who have come into close contact with this cryptid often describe the cryptid as giving off an absolutely foul smell that you just can't describe or explain as absolutely anything else. So today's cryptid is a little bit different than a cryptid I have ever covered on this channel before, and so while I'm talking about encounters and sightings with the Tatzelwurm, I'm going to be kind of presenting them in a little bit of a different manner. And the rest of this video is going to be a little bit different than any other cryptid video that I've done before. However, before we move on into this case or more into the video, I do just want to give my normal disclaimer that I do in every single video where I share other people's encounters. I just want to say I have never ever encountered a Tatzelwurm. I've never encountered any kind of cryptid. None of these stories are mine, none of these encounters are mine, and I just found them on the internet and put them in this video for entertainment purposes. So now that that's all out of the way, we can get on into the next part of this video. Like I mentioned already, the first story that I want to share with you guys about somebody who had encountered the Tatzelwurm is the very first encounter that anybody had ever had with this creature. And that was in 1779. And when the person who had this encounter, he didn't actually only encounter one of these creatures, but he encountered 2, meaning that this was not some sort of morphed beast, but there was, I guess, like a whole family, or like this was an entire species. That is what that kind of confirmed to me, that the very first sighting of this cryptid was not only one singular Tatzelwurm, but two of them. So anyways, now let's get into that encounter. The first ever sighting of a Tatzelwurm was by a man by the name of Hans Fesch, and this was in the year 1779. And after seeing these two creatures, he was absolutely terrified, just like I believe anybody would be. He was out in the forest when all of a sudden he saw these two horrible creatures, and they scared him so much that this actually gave Hans a heart attack. Now, he did end up sadly passing away due to the heart attack, but luckily before he did pass away, he was able to make it home, and once he got home, that is when he shared his story of what exactly he had seen with his loved ones. He told them that the creatures that he had seen were both 5 to 7 feet long, and that they had clawed front legs, and their bodies appeared to be that of a snake, but their head resembled a cat. He shared this story with his family, and then again, like I already mentioned, after he shared this story, he sadly passed away due to a heart attack that was completely brought on by fear. By the 18th century, the Tatzelwurm was seen so often all over Europe that most people didn't even entertain the thought that these creatures didn't exist. It was pretty much a known fact because they were seen so often. Then in 1828, a man supposedly found the body, or I guess the remains, of a Tatzelwurm, but before he could bring the worm back to his village, it had been pretty much completely eaten by crows. Now, it is said that there was half of the creature left, and they were able to kind of examine it, but the rest of the body was missing, and they couldn't really determine what exactly the remains had come from, if they did in fact come from a Tatzelwurm or not. What is so completely crazy about this cryptid and kind of makes it stand out than any other cryptid that I have ever dove into or talked about before is that by the 19th century, because the Tatzelwurm was seen so often, and again, so many people came forward having sightings of this creature that it was pretty much fact, and they didn't really doubt that it existed, that in the 19th century, this creature was confirmed to in fact be real. They didn't really consider it to be a made-up creature anymore. They didn't consider it to be something fictional or anything like that. They really believed that this creature was in fact real, and that maybe not everybody had seen it, but enough people did see it, and enough people came forward claiming to have seen it, that they confirmed that this was some kind of creature that was out there living in the Alps. In 1945, two boys who were 12 years old in southern Germany were out in the woods kind of just exploring as kids do when they came across a creature that they thought was a Tatzelwurm, and they shared their story once they got home with their parents. The boys described this creature as being about as long and thick as a man's arm, but I guess that would vary from which man's arm you're looking at, but anyways, that's what they described it as. They said that it was reddish in color and that its body kind of resembled that of a snake, but its head didn't really match its body at all, and they described the head of this creature as being pretty flat. They also said the creature gave off an absolutely foul odor, and once the creature noticed the boys, it started hissing and spitting at them before it completely fled the area. A very similar sighting that I came across happened in 1884 in Austria by a 13-year-old boy who had been in the woods similarly to the last story, and he was just kind of exploring and walking around when he came across a very strange creature. He said that this creature was reddish brown in color and that it was about 2 feet long, and that it kind of resembled that of a snake. He said that its body looked like that of a snake, but it had two very visible front legs, and it either didn't have hind legs at all or they were just hidden by its body. He didn't really say too much about the creature's head, but he did say that it gave off a foul odor, and once the creature noticed the boy, it did start to spit at him and then fled the area completely. Over the years, just like every cryptid I have ever come across, many photographers have come forward claiming that they have photos of the Tatzelwurm. However, all of these photos can pretty much be explained away as the photographer taking pictures of something else that they thought was a Tatzelwurm, or they were just a complete hoax and that the photographer was hoping to create these images to get money or fame or something along those lines. And that seems to be a reoccurring thing that happens with every cryptid. So now we are jumping forward to the 1990s, and I believe that the actual year that this happened was in the 90s. So this story includes two naturalists who I believe were like living in the wild in Italy, and that is when they came across a skeleton of what they believed belonged to a Tatzelwurm. Now, they brought the remains into the city and they brought them to scientists. However, the outcome of what exactly this creature was has never been discovered, and it's never really been talked about whether this was a Tatzelwurm and kind of confirmed that that is real or what exactly happened here. But they did say that they strongly believed that it was a Tatzelwurm, whatever the skeleton was that they found. And then in the year 2000, another skeleton that was believed to have belonged to a Tatzelwurm was found in Germany. And I think that this particular finding of the Tatzelwurm's remains is quite interesting. Whoever had discovered the remains this time gathered them up very, very carefully and sent them to the Geneva Institute of Science. Along with the Tatzelwurm's remains, they also sent a very, very, very large donation, but the entire thing was done completely anonymously, and whoever had donated the money and who had so securely brought in the remains of this creature has never been identified and remains completely anonymous to this day. However, I don't believe that their research or them finding the Tatzelwurm and bringing it into the lab, anything like that ever came of anything, because they didn't really come out and say whether these were the remains of a Tatzelwurm or they were the remains of something else. The next encounter that I'm going to be sharing with you guys is one that I found on 4chan, so take from that what you will. Obviously, there is no way to determine whether or not this is true. However, I thought that the story sounded pretty genuine. Now, I know in my cryptid videos I do usually talk about more first-hand encounters in depth. However, I did have a pretty hard time finding any first-hand encounters with the Tatzelwurm, but I have more to say on that closer to the end of the video after I'm done talking about this encounter, so let's just get right into it. So this encounter took place in the Austrian Alps in I believe the year 2018, and the person we are talking about today is a hunter. He likes hunting and he is an avid hunter, and he shares that the rifle that he uses to hunt is called a Steyr M95. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that correctly, I know absolutely nothing about guns. So this person shared with us that he was at a disclosed location in the Austrian Alps getting ready to, I guess, hunt, and he would be camping up there for a little while, and the place that he decided to set up camp was on a steep rock face in between two mountains looking over a very beautiful valley. Now, where exactly he had set up camp, it was kind of like a rock bed, so underneath his entire campsite and the area where he had set up his campsite was all rock, and he does go on to say that there was plenty of like cracks in the rock that were quite big and that an animal could in fact live inside of. It was the first day that he had been up in this area, and he was really tired after a long day of hunting, so he was now just sitting near a fire having some beers, and then he decided that it was time to go to bed. But once he went to bed, he was awoken at around midnight to an absolutely horrible smell. He described this smell as if an animal had been squished and its entire insides and its juices were spread all over the campsite. He said it was just absolutely foul, like nothing he had ever smelt before. So he said he's a very paranoid person, so he jumped up out of his campsite with his knife in hand, and he saw some movement in the bushes that were located close to his tent, so he just started kind of poking around in there, thinking that some larger animal was in there eating an animal. And that is when he saw what appeared to be the, I guess, like tail of a snake, and it kind of retreated back into one of the cracks that was in the rock bed that this campsite was located on. After dealing with this, he was pretty relieved to think that it was only a snake that had been eating something in the bushes, and he had now scared it off, so he went back into his tent and went to sleep. But he wasn't even asleep for an hour when he was woken up yet again, but this time it was by a very loud whistling. So he grabbed his rifle and exited his tent. To his utter horror, when he got out of the tent, he was staring face to face with the strangest creature that he had come across in his entire life. It looked like it had a snake's body, but it appeared as if it had 2 front legs, and he describes its head as looking between a mixture of a cat and a lizard. At this point, he was completely panicking, so he tried to put a round into his gun, but he goes on to explain that his gun is very, very old, and so he kind of homemade the rounds. He just like recapped them, I guess, and put them back in the gun. And at this point, they were giving him a really, really rough time. It took him a few minutes to get his rounds into his rifle, and by the time he did, this creature had already sized him up. The creature was 5 feet tall and about 1.5 meters in length, and it wouldn't be very hard for this creature to take this man down, and that is exactly what it did. It let out this very loud whistling, screeching noise, and then it attacked him, and he tried to shoot at it, but he completely missed, and the creature managed to bite his arm. However, the narrator was wearing a very thick jacket, so the creature's teeth were not able to penetrate the coat, luckily. I guess after the creature realized that his teeth did not penetrate the creature that it was attacking, it let go of the man's arm and again let out one of these horrible screams and went to bite him again. However, at this point, the man managed to get his knife out of his pocket and he began to kind of stab at the Tatzelwurm. Luckily for him, this was successful and the creature kind of retreated back into its like little hole area where it was living inside of the rock bed. He said that after he had stabbed the creature, the blood that was coming out of it smelled even worse than the stench that it was already giving off. And he said that during the entire time that this creature was attacking him, the smell was so bad that it was enough that he almost passed out. After the creature retracted into its little hole area, the man said that he grabbed his gun and began to shoot into the hole just to kind of secure the fact that this creature wasn't going to come after him, and then he gathered up all of his belongings and completely abandoned his hunting trip because he just was so terrified and decided that this was not worth it. Now, he wrote this story on 4chan and then asked if anybody on the site could tell him what exactly this animal was, because he had Googled all kinds of things and had not come across what exactly it was that he had seen that night. But the only thing that seems to fit what he had seen is the legend of the Tatzelwurm. Stories like these nowadays about the Tatzelwurm are quite rare, especially given the fact that so many people had reported seeing this creature way back when, but many cryptozoologists and even scientists believe that the Tatzelwurm could very well be real. The scientists and the cryptozoologists believe that the Tatzelwurm is some sort of deformed species of salamander that kind of compares to the Gila monster or the Gilly monster. And this comparison isn't really too outlandish because the Gilly monster is often confused with the tiger salamander. So there are already some similarities, so maybe this is just a different strain of that. Many people believe that the Tatzelwurm does in fact exist or did in fact exist, and it is either on the brink of going extinct and that is why it isn't seen as often today, or it has already gone completely extinct, and that is why people don't really report seeing them anymore, and that is why there isn't really any solid concrete proof whether or not this creature actually exists. But guys, that is really all that I have for you on today's video. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!